right now on Higher Journeys Radio with Alexis Brooks. What does it take to bring yourself closer to reality? One that is unfiltered, unfettered, and ready to be fully explored. Neil Kramer, a spiritual philosopher and esotericist, joins us once again on Higher Journeys to discuss a film that illustrates what discovering the path of truth really entails. In a documentary that he wrote, narrated, and co-produced entitled Transmutation, the elements are in full view as to how any individual walking the face of this earth is invited to discover truth on their own terms, outside of the limits of normal, but only if they so choose. Once chosen, what's discovered will ultimately change not only their view of reality, but reveal what to so many seems stubbornly hidden and out of reach. Why is it that some individuals have a natural thirst for discovery and others perfectly okay with living a status quo existence? And in this age of revelation, why is it that still the masses seem so tethered to their sleep state, even while the truth is beckoning their attention? Neil addresses these questions with his usual eloquence and unmistakable candor. Let's listen in to what Neil had to share. Neil, it's been over a year since you last joined us here at Higher Journeys, and during our last chat, we discussed spiritual sovereignty, shadow mapping, and discovering reality out of what you refer to as simply empire. Well, today I'm excited that we're going to continue down this powerful path of discussion, but this time within the context of what I have to say is one of the most exhilarating, liberating, and powerful films I've seen in a long time. And that's your documentary film, Transmutation, that you wrote, narrated, and co-produced along with Niles Heckman. Now, before we get started, I want everyone to have a sneak peek as to what this film, Transmutation, is all about. Let's have a look, and we'll be right back.
This life is a gift of learning. We can do whatever we want with it. We can go wherever we please. We can be with whomever we choose. Our time is our own. So what do? We are not workers or consumers or bystanders. The ways of empty toil and obedient endurance are not our ways. There are no careers, no authorities. Success and failure do not exist. These are the old, unconscious patterns, refuges for those who choose sleep. We came here to grow, to bear vivid witness and embody the deepest wisdom. We call this spiritual development. It is radical. It changes people, moment by moment, year by year. When we live like this, the universal creation acknowledges our presence for the first time. The world can see us. We become known to it. We begin to recognize that reality is a place of profound intimacy and providence. Every moment offers meaning. The spell of randomness fades. Magic arises. This is the pilgrimage of the great mystery. The pathways must be walked. Words are not enough. The spiritual adventure is in the flesh.
Well, all right. First, let me say, man, you both knocked this out of the park big time. Congratulations. Beautifully done.
Thank you very much. That's very well received, and we're very grateful to hear that. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be able to watch it and enjoy it and take it in. So, as I went through the film a couple of days ago, I thought I could just spend the entire hour today quoting you, as I often like to do. I mean, there's so many powerful messages that you leave the audience with, Neil. And I'll probably pepper our discussion with a few of those quotes along the way. But I want to start with these two, if I may. So I'm going to say, quote, "To walk a path of truth is to take life into your own hands." And another, right on the heels of this, "The more truthfully we live, the closer the bond," end quote. Let's start with these two. I mean, this film is about self-discovery through recognition of what I think you once referred to as channel normal, and then taking the responsibility to explore and discover the power inherent in unfiltered reality through an individualized and sovereign journey. Would I be close in distilling what this film is all about? Transmutation.
Why not? Why not? Why can't you be close? It sounds good enough to me.
Okay.
Well, I would say, because there's so many aspects to this film, it's such a broad and deep investigation of reality. But as I've been talking about it for a little while now, I would say it's a film about beauty, about spirit, and about growth. And what you said fits perfectly into that, no problem. And those simple words, beauty, spirit, growth, describe everything that we set out to do with this little independent film. And you can't really get any more independent than we were with this. We did exactly what we wanted to do. And we didn't want anybody pointing us in a direction that we weren't happy with. And we didn't want anybody who was funding this that expected certain things or was, cajoling us in one direction. So we did it all ourselves with a small bunch of dedicated guys who produced this very lovely film. And the other thing we wanted is we knew that the content, quote, philosophically and spiritually would have no problem with that, because I could do the best I could and satisfy myself that I can produce something substantial and interesting. And we also spoke to 5 or 6 other people who,
Yes.
sit down and talk to the camera. And I know those guys, they've all sort of been involved in my work in one way or another.
I wanted to ask you, that was my next question. How did you find them? So, okay, you knew these individuals. I know there were, I think, 6 people that were all extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, they've either, come to my events or listened to my materials or worked with me directly. So a lot of people you see in the film, I know them, the people that I know in my life, professionally, on the whole. But those people also share their growth and their spirit and their beauty. And so we knew we'd have no problem with that. The biggest challenge was we wanted to make a film that had the production values of a multi-million-dollar film, like a $10-20 million film. So we wanted to do the impossible, really, which is elevate the visuals to the super pro level.
You did that.
You did that. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is you get someone to pay for you to do this. So if somebody chips in millions of dollars, then you can start to pour that time and effort and everything into it. The other way is you don't do that, but it just takes a very long time, which was the path that we took. So it took us like 2 or 3 years really to make this film.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, I don't mean exclusively like the rest of our life was on hold forever. We were all doing other things at the same time. But Niles Heckman, the director, producer, and main cinematographer of this, I mean, he put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into this thing, maybe thousands, I don't know, but an enormous amount of time. So you have to love it. You have to love the project. It's like a violinist who practices, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day every day. You've got to love it. You can't just slog at this thing.
No way.
It's doing, a tax return, or you're filling out forms or spreadsheets or something awful. It's a labor of love. So the thing that Niles and I made sure of was that we respected and were cool with each other. So we, spent the time to make sure that we would work well together. Before we did anything, we did that, and that little experiment worked. And then we, worked together on this thing for 3 years. And I was writing and narrating or whatever, which honestly was not difficult. It was a pleasure to do. I was also in the film a lot as well, walking around and, you're walking with me through various landscapes and sat in various locations and stuff. So there was just a massive amount of time and effort, but we decided to do that to raise the production values to the very professional, high quality level. So that was the other thing we wanted to do, because we wanted the visuals to match the substance. And I'll say one more bit on that as well. We also wanted the music to do it. So we used a bunch of amazing people in this. Niles, as I say, was the director and key cinematographer. We had two other cinematographer guys, Matt Smith and Andrew Bradford. And we had 4 musicians who either contributed original work or allowed us to use their existing original work. So we had a guy, Wes Wellenbring, Jody Vernon, Jim Lawler, Ben Rawlins. And we had another sound design guy, Andrew Scott Duncan, who all those people together put in their time and effort and stuff basically for nothing, because there's no budget, you know what I mean?
Right.
So a lot of them just did what you call a title card, i.e. a credit at the end. So all these guys have worked on incredible things in the past. I mean, Niles has been involved. He hates me saying this stuff because he doesn't really do this anymore, but he was, visual effects and digital art, and he's been technical director on films like Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean, Terminator 3, Matrix Reloaded.
This shows, by the way. Yeah, absolutely shows.
You don't get bigger than that. I mean, that's not what Niles does anymore. He kind of learned some of his craft there. But of course, he wanted to go out and make a film of substance, not just entertainment, not just pulp, but something that had character and quality. And I think Niles would also add to that something that had longevity, that in 30 years is going to still be relevant, and in 130 years is still going to be relevant. So we also tried to make something that had a timeless quality to it, which wasn't sort of mired in the culture of the moment, if you see what I mean. I'm nodding my head and smiling broadly because I'm watching the film as you're describing it and agreeing wholeheartedly. I mean, look, based on how you described how all of you came together as this little experiment that lasted a few years and basically created the very thing that you're discussing. You described transmutation as what? About beauty? Say it again. Beauty, spirit, growth.
Well, I think that the project, what was implicit in doing that project were those 3 things, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we did. I mean, beauty as number one, and especially when you're doing a film that depicts beauty, if you get it wrong, it comes across as very cheesy.
Yes.
Well, and it comes across as silly and a kind of like a platitude.
Yeah.
So we wanted to capture the beauty of first and foremost, the landscape. So the landscape is a major character in this film. And as Niles and I shot mostly in Oregon and Washington and California on the beautiful west coast of America. But Matt Smith and Andrew Bradford also filmed in India, Japan, Asia, Africa, all over the world. So as we were all going about our business in all the different places that we travel to and live in, we were always capturing footage for this film, always. So it was filmed over 5 continents.
Isn't that something? I'm so glad you agreed to do this interview about this, because guys out there, Neil has been somewhat conservative about. I wouldn't say conservative. I mean, the film has been out for a little over a year now, or just approaching a year. And as you've said, this has been more of a labor of love, and let's get out and do a marketing plan for it. And I don't know, maybe I'm that little bird whispering in your ear saying it needs to get out there to more people, because it is worthy of it, guys. I'm going to comment. So let me say a few things as someone who's just watched it.
Please do.
I just felt, first of all, I did not settle for watching it on a computer screen. Fortunately, with my plug for Apple, my Apple TV, I was able to AirPlay it to my large screen and surround sound. And I say, for everyone out there that I know is going to pick up a copy of this, as you should when we're done, do yourself a favor and see it, experience it with proper equipment. The music is just delectable, not just the choice of music, but the quality that you guys recorded in. And I say, forgive the cliche, this was a feast for the senses, the physical senses as well as the soul, in how you put this together. I was just salivating the whole time. I don't know what else to say. I really was. This is not,
well, that's great.
And I told you offline, you said you probably watch a lot of films, and the answer was, no, I don't. I try to be, meticulous in what I choose to watch for various reasons. And I knew it would be good, but it exceeded my expectations, clearly. Most important, with all of the senses that are definitely tickled here, the message is profound. And this is what I want to get into, because there's a lot of stuff to parse here. Let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk about the general themes of this transmutation. Are those that you, as a spiritual philosopher and esotericist, have been talking about for years. We know that, those of us who know and love your work. First, let me just ask this. Do you feel that since you began speaking about these fundamental and perennial ideas, that more individuals are starting to, quote, get it? Neil?
No, I don't. I feel less people are doing it, but in a deeper way. I think more and more people are switching off and are killing themselves with mainstream ideas in the new age and in material culture. However, speaking, I think, to the spirit of what you're saying, there is a select proportion of people, men and women of all backgrounds, all persuasions, all creeds, who are going deeper. So not more in number, but I would say deeper in substance and deeper in their inquiry into reality, into God. Deeper and deeper. That is better than the numbers for me.
I love it. I love it. And I certainly, though I never really thought about it that way. We, as the cliche goes, not quality over quantity. Not so in the numbers, and I know that they're relatively small out of 7.5, maybe even close to 8 billion people at this point. The depth of those who are choosing the experience is so incredible. Maybe the butterfly effect will take effect and somehow affect. Yeah, maybe that's what's required.
It's a critical mass idea that you only need, if we were to pick a biblical number, which I'm quite happy to do, 144,000 people who decide to bring themselves close to reality, which of course most people do not, but those who choose to do that through their own free will and their own strength of character, if they do spiritual work in themselves, that has a ripple effect, physically, emotionally, sexually, artistically, culturally, intellectually, on everything that they do, everywhere they go, even with their mouths closed and with, sunglasses over their eyes. Everything they do, they illuminate.
Absolutely.
So they bring their beauty and their truth to everything they do.
Well, getting back to those 6 individuals, I was just utterly impressed. I mean, I'm going to just have to shower you with accolades the whole time. It's worth it. I'm going to do it. But equally so, each individual, I remember the first gentleman, I wish I could recall a quote that he had about where the nectar is.
They all said so much.
They all said so much. Remember James, the woman that said, I decided to invite my pain to tea.
That's my wife, as a matter of fact.
Is it really? Oh my gosh, I'm getting a chill. Shout out to Mrs. Kramer. Oh, that was such
Kramer, yeah.
Beautiful.
Mrs. K, she's known in the business. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, she got there on her own merits as well, I have to say, because we had about 10 people that we did some filming with, and every single one of them was amazing, but we didn't have enough space to do it. And I said to everybody, we may not use your footage in this. I think film people are familiar with saying that, but if you've not been on many films, you're not used to why was I not good enough because you didn't, include me. I'm so sad or, frustrated. But I mean, with 4 or 5 other people who were also wonderful that we filmed some great stuff with, but they didn't get on it. So, a little panel of us sat together and decided who said the things that not were the best, but were most representative of the spirit of this film. So the other people who said things that were also awesome, that material might go into something else at some point.
Okay.
That was it. And when you were saying, what's the gist of this thing? Because I've spoken broadly about it, beauty, spirit, growth. The narrative of it, let me speak of that for a moment. You may have noticed when you were watching it that there's three distinct acts. Act 1 is separation. Act 2 is searching, and Act 3 is reunion.
Yes.
And those three elements are often described in classical spiritual mythology, such as in the journey of Persephone into Hades and her eventual return to her mother Demeter. Same thing, separation, searching, reunion. Also in alchemy, they use those things. So if you look carefully at the film, you'll see alchemical references throughout.
Yes.
So you'll see the first act is nigredo, blackening, deconstruction. The second act is albedo, whitening, purification. And the third act is rubedo, reddening, creation. So there's that's the surface narrative, those three acts. The deeper narrative, the most remarkable thing about this film to me, aside from its beauty, is the layering that we've put into it. So one of the other things that took a long time was there's a deeper narrative, many messages and layers of knowledge embedded into this film that you won't see on the first pass. Now, some of that layering is done in poetic form, in my verbal presentation. Some of it is in pictorial, symbolic form that you'll see. Some of it is coded. You won't even see it unless you keep pausing it. And I don't just mean the flashes of images that you see sometimes. I mean actual things that we say. You'll see that there's a reference to it, even where the light strikes people, where it's striking them, where it's coming. Some of the, levels of knowledge in there go beyond what you would normally see in a film. And that's a sort of nod to the esoteric principle, which is if the student asks you a big question, then you should give them a full answer. But you give them an answer in a way that's respectful to everybody's level of development, i.e., the surface level is for everybody. Let's say like a biblical parable that everybody can understand. The middle layer of the cake is a bit more juicy, which is for those who have been walking a path for a long time and start to see, I get what's being said here. That's interesting. I see that they're making a more profound message in a subtle way. And then there's a third layer, which is super coded into the film, where we put a lot of other information, a lot of other knowledge, which you'll just not see that in many other films. I can only think of 2 or 3 out of the whole of film history that has done that. So it's impossibly difficult to do it, but we took the time to do it. So there's a great richness in that film. And as people who might want to watch it, I mean, you can go to transmutationfilm.com. We'll say this at the end a bit clearer, but transmutationfilm.com. You could watch it for $5. It's like, nothing, $5. You can download it and keep it forever for yourself for $30. But with that $30, you're getting the opportunity to dive into that content. And you also get commentaries with it as well. So there's 3 separate commentaries with that, where Niles and myself go through and talk about all the different elements of its production, its purpose, its meaning, how we did this, how we did that, some of the magical shots, some of the effects, some real magic that you see in that film, which we can talk about. But it's quite a nice package for someone who's interested in such things. It's well worth it. And as I always say, it's basically the price of a large pizza. So
there
it's
you
not
go.
bad, is it really?
Okay. So listen, before we lose the theme of layers upon layers of messages, I'm going to point one out, may I? I don't think it's going to be a spoiler, but I'll let you decide. So here's one that I picked up beautifully. There were several, and I've only seen it once, and rest assured I'll be seeing it multiple times. There's a visual that has to do with one of the individuals, a woman that you filmed, who's a sun gazer. And at the end, I believe it was at the end of at least one portion of what she was talking about in terms of her entry point in her journey. She's facing the sun, I believe it's over a highway, and she's wearing whatever kind of top she's wearing created sort of this wispy, wingy look. And as the camera, now I'm not a cinematographer, so I don't know what term you would use for this effect, but as she is gazing, I believe, at a setting or maybe a rising sun, the way the light went down, it gave the impression that she was an angel. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
Was
And
that
that's a very poignant, beautiful moment in that film with
sure is.
a wonderful lady called Amanda, who is the woman you're talking about, who's a super, super lady. I've known her for many years, a very special woman. And that idea that you're talking about is highly illustrative of what we're talking about here, which is that's a symbolic, it's a visual image, but it's a demonstration of what a human being is in essence, which is a higher form. And we can depict that symbolically, or we can depict that literally, and people can choose for themselves how figurative or how literal we're being. But in that sense, again, you're seeing the connection between the human, a higher angelic form, angeloi, messenger form, and a solar form, and those three things are working together. So you're seeing a trinity of being, a solar being,
I got
physical
that.
material being, and a higher energetic being, all in one. So well done. 10 out of 10.
All right. Oh, I listen, you sold me. I think I'm going to go back and watch it again tonight. There's one, and I'm going to be thinking about it.
Another 500.
There you go. And I believe they're all there. So here's some of the terms that I would use to describe this, some thoughts that come to mind just at a snapshot. Complex but fundamental. Truth hidden in plain sight. Perennial and even paradoxical. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what I might be talking about?
You mean a specific bit or overall?
No, these are just thoughts that as I was watching this film,
Yeah.
I thought, and paradoxical is probably the first thing. I have always felt that there's something about reality that is a living paradox. You know, going back to my favorite quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And somehow that came out in this film. These are individuals who are experiencing the paradox of normal and natural and embracing both the exoteric and the esoteric. That's what I'm talking about. I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, paradox is definitely important in genuine spiritual inquiry, in one's closeness to God, and in one's journey to origin and destiny. Paradox is a big deal because it's, as you say, it's the ability for somebody to say, you know, I'm not here to be comfortable and happy. I'm here to know the truth. And if there's ever a decision between the two, I'll always choose truth. For me, that's paradoxical. I see in many people's lives because they're feeling that, you know, the spiritual journey is open to everybody equally, which it is. And yet so few people choose it. So few people choose to do anything with it, apparently, because they're primarily interested in their own comfort and security and entertainment. So most of the spiritual popular world, you know, in spirituality and religion, in New Age, in psychology and all those things, most of that world is about trying to make people feel good about themselves. It's not about truth. It's about fantasies to make people feel good about themselves. The paradox, therefore, is how do you make an uplifting film, which is something we did want to do. We don't want to make a gloomy one. How do you make an uplifting film and address that point without disempowering or dispiriting anybody? Now that's paradoxical in the sense that you have to deal with two opposing things. The thing that spiritual adventure and accomplishment is open to every man, woman and child in totally equal measure. It's the only equity in life, I believe. How somebody grasps that, though, is dependent on so many factors, which we try and deal with in this film. So there are paradoxes, and whether you believe in Christian principles as I do, which we barely touch on in the film because we don't need to, we're speaking very broadly about things, or whether you're into, you know, Hindu spiritual culture, or whether you're a total materialist, to me it doesn't matter awfully. Because once you start to examine truth, you are going to see divine handiwork, divine craftsmanship, and you're going to have to face the reality that this thing was created. It didn't just evolve out of hydrogen and carbon and snot crawling out of an ocean. The whole thing was made. Everything was made, crafted intelligently from scratch. And that is shown by showing the essence of nature. So the other thing in watching this film is you start to see there's an intelligence and a grace inside nature, and it's not just something that science thinks is natural selection or adaptation. It's something more profound than that. And so that's paradoxical, because showing nature at its most organic, as we do throughout the film, we're also showing the striking challenge of nature, which is it is constantly saying to you, I was made. I didn't evolve, I was made. And that is the great paradox throughout the film. We don't explicitly get into that, but if you watch it carefully, you'll see that over and over again is demonstrated.
That's interesting. I'll have to say that was not necessarily what I got. And yet, as a fundamental idea or postulate, I think I understand what you're saying. I've always been a proponent of looking at nature not just as a metaphor for our lives, but a mirror. And you, again, did that incredibly beautifully.
We did want to make one other point about nature as well, which is kind of a very simple one, but it's a profound one. The natural environment is a very important ally in spiritual development. If all we do is sit inside places and transport ourselves around and, gab on about things and carp on about things, sat inside little boxes and rectangles, life is difficult, honestly. So the other thing we tried to do is inspire people to make them want to feel to get out, to get outside.
It sure does. When you're in the woods, absolutely.
Into their coastlines, to their parks and woodland, forests, deserts, wherever. You see all those environments in this film. So, we live in an extraordinarily beautiful environment, and it's very temporary, our time here. So time in nature, it to me is a prerequisite for spiritual accomplishment in oneself, just for privately for oneself. There's no outside measure for this necessarily at that point, but your relationship with nature teaches you about your relationship with God. That's how important it is. Outside of that, I can't see how you do it. You just have to believe stuff that somebody tells you.
Well, and that's what most people do. I'm sorry to cut you off. That's what most people do.
Whereas the experiential, it says if you want to learn about communion, do it with a pure form. You can do it with some rare humans, that is possible, but certainly with nature, you've got a ready-built environment that says, I can show you what relationship is. So throughout the film, we're not just doing it just because it looks nice. We're doing it to show the relationship between the, sort of protagonist, the person that you follow around, what he's saying, and the environment is in are one thing.
Absolutely.
Like the secret of the Holy Grail in King Arthur mythology. The king and the land are one.
This is perennial wisdom, and yet it cannot be enunciated enough in so many ways, and you do it with such poetic tone. It seems almost cliche in some conventional New Age circles that get out in nature and get your feet on the ground and grounding and all that great stuff. But the way it's conveyed by you and people of your spiritual ilk, I think, is just so powerful. I couldn't agree more. Communion with nature. Look, this is what the transcendentalist, Ralph Waldo Emerson, my favorite, right in my neck of the woods, literally down the street, wrote about solitude within that kind of environment. I think you and I have talked about it before. It has so much to teach us.
It's really important.
It's very important, including, I know you bring this theme up, the importance of creation and destruction ad infinitum. Does nature not do the same thing? Dormancy and coming back up. I marvel at it every year. I'm an avid gardener, so I'm out there all the time. So I hear you. We're on the same page there. Let's talk about this, because I'm looking at the clock and, I don't know, maybe you think we can go an hour? We're about half hour in. I've been shortening this, but guys, this is good stuff. So if you can hang with me for an hour, let's do the full hour, shall we? Listen, I want to talk about challenge. I've always asked this question, Neil. At some deep level, Could that which we see and experience as painful, tumultuous, challenging, be designed as a trigger to find its opposite and eventually realize and embody equilibrium? In other words, are those who seem to perpetuate all that appears as shadow, we call them empire, simply be characters in a play that is being orchestrated at a much deeper level?
Yes, it's a very high level. So it's invisible to most people who are not paying close attention or who have filled their lives with busyness and chores and errands that take all their attention. But if you just stop and put those things away and look into life rather than at it, if you look into it, you see that the characters, both the natural ones like the politicians and the corporations and the governments and the nation states and whatnot, those characters are depicting the state of humanity. And we won't get specific about individuals because I don't think we need to at this moment, but it's been like that forever. There's nothing extraordinarily different now, although there are some wonderful things happening in the United States at the moment that are hidden to most people. But the United States is the savior of this whole thing, in my view. Mm-hmm. Very, very glad to be part of that. The second point, though, that is the one that I really want to emphasize, because we've got a short time, is that those forces that create dynamism in the positive and in the negative and in harmony and disharmony, and the suffering that comes from one's inability to deal with disharmony, because that really is all that suffering is. It's mainly in the imagination, and that then becomes physical and so on. But those forces are essentially of supernatural character and origin. And I think that's the big thing that people don't want to talk about in mainstream spiritual liberalism, is that what's the defining characteristic of that? It's honestly, it's anti-supernatural. It wants everything to be physical and psychological, essentially, and it likes to play with spiritual notions. But genuine spiritual life, the essence of it is that the whole superstructure here is of supernatural origin, and the controlling factor in this temporary earth in which we're in is negative. And so dealing with that negativity, confronting the negative, is an essential part of spiritual accomplishment. Mm-hmm. That means to have wisdom, you must suffer. And anyone who doesn't see that, I don't believe them. If I think of the 10 wisest people I know, they've all suffered. And I too suffer. But I suffer less and less because I've improved my relationship with disharmony. Mm-hmm. And I see that suffering is purification.
Yeah.
And the more that you can do it in its burning core, the less it dogs you in life, and the less you are despondent or desolate or fed up, right, or in pain, because you allow the suffering to do its thing, and that is a purifying fire. Uh-huh. As we said in our second act, albedo, purification, whitening, that is an essential part of alchemy. Until that takes place, you cannot know something. So pain is essential in spiritual life, essential.
Okay. I bring this whole idea up in the context of the film because it appears that each individual, Neil, that told of their story and their entry point, whether they didn't harp on it certainly, but whether it was assumed that there was a bit of that brought them to where they are. And I want
absolutely right.
Absolutely. So this was addressed but still in the most positive of ways and very effective. And you have a quote that I think I wanted you to elaborate on, but I think you've already answered it. You say that our roots are not in the earth, but in fire.
We don't come from here. This world is temporary. We come from a different place. And this place is going away. And soon it will be gone, all of it, forever. The whole thing, the entire 3D structure will be gone, forever and ever and ever. And it will be dissolved completely, disintegrated, because it served its purpose. Its teaching mechanism, through polarity, has finally taught all those who were willing to know everything necessary to go onward. And so the entire 3D world is dispensed with forever and ever and ever. Those who go onwards are those who can be transferred willingly through their own accomplishment into their, quote, light body. Or if you were a Christian, you would call it their glorified body. Same thing. Doesn't make any difference. So that is all a matter of light, wisdom, fire. They're the same thing. Light, wisdom, fire. Same thing. This world is made of light. It's frozen light. And so for it to be gone away with on fire is how it was birthed. So in esoteric Christian cosmology, we see there are three Earths: an original Earth, a fallen Earth we're in now, and a new Earth. And those elements are extremely important in my spiritual understanding of life. And so again, to depict the sun and the solar energies and how beautiful they are and how important for the elevation of a person's consciousness is a very important motif throughout the film. So if you watch how the sun is striking things always, and as you pointed out, how Amanda elevates her form in the sun, then you start to see what we're talking about.
I understand. You know what comes to mind, beautifully stated, by the way, as always with you, in terms of this idea of this earth as we understand it going away and being replaced by a new earth, which is a concept that I think is matriculated throughout lots of different teachings. But in terms of this being sort of a training ground, I love the quote by, you're familiar with physicist Tom Campbell, I'm sure, who wrote My Big Toe.
Yeah, and I've done an interview with him.
Fantastic. Well, he has he is. I haven't actually worked with him, but through other people, I've learned a lot about him. And he has this postulate, Neil, that says that he feels that this reality represents an entropy reduction trainer for souls. And that's always stuck with me. And I think it kind of jives with what you're saying.
That's right. It's called Christian theology. It's absolutely bang on. It's absolutely true. You won't hear it in any churches, but if you go to the root of Scripture, that's exactly what it's teaching you, particularly in the New Testament. Exactly what he just said. He's just saying it in modern, contemporary, distilled language, but that is basic Christian theology.
Isn't that something? Always has resonated with me. I never, things that just sort of resonate, I never let them go. I'll quote them forever, and I've done so many times.
It works. You can smell the truth in it. That's why.
You can. You absolutely can. Can you guys out there, journeyers? I hope so. This is deep stuff and yet fundamental. There's that paradox again. Well, let's see. Let's go to another quote, because like I said, you should have seen me taking copious notes. Oh my God, I've got to quote this, quote that, quote that. Let me ask you a question. You could certainly take this narrative, this extraordinary narrative of yours that accompanied this film, and create a book from it. Have you thought about that? It's certainly book worthy.
No, I hate writing.
Do you really? Do you?
I do, yeah.
To be such a beautiful writer, that's something.
I do.
Oh,
and I'll tell you why. Because for me, the word is much more exciting and interesting and powerful when it's alive. So I've consciously, over the last 10 years, really since when I last wrote a book, enjoyed taking language into the living environment. So like one of my early boyhood heroes, Socrates, he never wrote a single word down, not a sentence. There's not one published thing about anything, and yet he's the father of modern philosophy and science and the scientific method in a manner of speaking. And he was a great man, multidisciplined in spiritual life, in alchemical life, in scientific life, the whole thing, the whole shooting match. It was very holistic in those days, and he never wrote anything down. So if it wasn't for Plato and Porphyry, we'd never know anything about what he said. And I thought that was cool. I always thought that was kind of cool. That here's a person who knows that the value of the word is in its living emanation, in its form.
Yeah.
So most of my work actually is constituted in spoken form. So if you go on my website and listen to Roamcast,
yes,
it's like 30 plus hours of totally free Roamcasts to listen to, where I'm walking around and saying stuff. There's also workshops in there, like 100 hours of workshop. I don't know, maybe not quite that many, but there's bloody 100 plus hours.
Trust me, I know. Been there
in total. and you can listen to that stuff, and there's something more in it. I'm not sure people want to read anymore. I think they want to listen. Some people want to watch, but they certainly like to listen.
Yeah.
I love to listen. There's a couple of guys I listen to. I won't tell you they are. No one's heard of them anyway. And I've listened to maybe 3, 5, 700 hours of their material because it's just good. It's truthful. I can smell the veracity and the vitality in it.
Right.
If they'd written it down, I'm not sure I would have read it, but I love listening to it.
Well, let's dig into that for a minute. Let's go off on a little bit of a tangent there. We're talking about the spoken word and you being such an orator. You have a beautiful voice. I, of course, love to talk. And I've always had this sense, Neil, that sound being one of our primary, or hearing, I should say, being one of our primary senses, it's doing more than just hitting the eardrum. There is a frequency associated with sound, as we well know, as well as color and other things. Is there something in the frequency, particularly with a given cadence and what those words are?
Yes.
That
so on the human level,
yes.
Let me interject
Go ahead.
because I know exactly what you mean. If I may just jump in there,
Go
I
for
beg your
it.
pardon. On the human level, there is sincerity and authenticity in the voice. There is also ego and problems and baggage and issues in the voice, and everybody can tell which way it's swinging. Everybody can tell. So my problems in life are in the voice. My triumphs and achievements in life are in the voice. My love and compassion and tenderness are in the voice. The more genuine and decent and virtuous a person is, the more pleasant the voice is, the more trustworthy the voice is, because everything about a person is in the voice, the sound, not the content. That too, of course. I mean the bloody sound. If I sat here and read, the telephone directory, if you can even remember what one of those is anymore, and just started reading, Anderson, Baker, Charlesworth, Davidson, you can tell a ton about a person just in the voice. Now, on the metaphysical level, in the voice also is spirit. And the amount of spirit a person is able to deal with, channel, conjure, host within themselves is also depicted in the voice. I could tell you an awful lot about a person, not only their history and their dreams and fears and desires, not only their wishes, and not only logistical and personal details about their life just from the sound of the voice, but also their level of spiritual attainment and their spiritual love of life from the voice, because it's in the voice. So that's why it's really difficult to listen to certain people, even though the content is good, because there's an incongruity between what they're saying and the sound of the voice, because the sound of the voice is intrinsically linked to it. I mean, it's a little bit different, when I'm doing an interview, there's a slight air of formality in the voice that might slip down a little bit if you're talking to me, in the kitchen in half an hour, but not much. This is pretty much how I talk, and of course I'm a little bit more humorous and congenial normally, but even when I'm trying to talk about something just to somebody in my personal life, to my wife, to my sister-in-law, to my father, whoever, I'm going to speak in a voice where I'm trusting that how I feel about something is embedded in the frequency, in the tonality, as you say, the cadence of the sound. And I'm going to choose words not that are ostentatious and over flowery and florid, but words that are powerful. Like before, when we were talking about the film, there's lots of fancy words we could use, but beauty, spirit, growth, how powerful are they? But how powerful are they when they're said with purpose?
Absolutely.
And they're said with feeling? So when you said them, I could hear it. When I said them, I could hear it, because we mean it. And the people listening to this show, it's resonant if you understand what those things are. And of course, many of your listeners definitely do, because of the type of person that you attract. But that's the thing, it's the sound. So, I mean, I couldn't be more interested, Alexis, in what you're saying there. We could do a whole bloody 2 hours.
Oh, I'd love to. I'm, again, nodding my
Everything
head
is in the
graciously.
voice.
Everything is in the voice. And I am such an advocate of whatever you're doing. I talk to myself all the time, though I know full well that I'm being heard. And again, I emphasize it's not the enunciation, it is what is behind it. You can't fake the feeling, forgive the cliche. You cannot fake the feeling. It will be perceived as it's meant to. You are in your voice. You hit right where I was going. You got it, man. It's really the metaphysical that I was wanting to pull out of you. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for again. I apologize for cutting you off.
No,
but I was
you can
excited
do that.
to say it. You see, so
I can tell.
when you know somebody, you and I know each other a little, and we can forgive each other that. But I like what you said as well about the fact that it's not about the vocabulary. It's not about the articulation and enunciation, although you in your way and me in my way do rather well with that. And again, many of your guests do, I'm sure. Many of your listeners do. We have good language skills, let's say that. It's not that. It's not. It's allowing yourself the faith in your own spiritual love to allow that to come into the sound that you're making through your, through your vocal cords.
Agreed. Yeah,
and allow it to come out. It's a risk, it's a sacrifice, because some people will not like it or mock it or deride it. There's always that. But I have faith in spiritual life because it's experientially been proven for decades. And that's personal. I don't need anyone to believe that with me. I don't.
No, I know
that.
I know that about you.
But if somebody likes to walk alongside me, I would love them to. They're very welcome to do that. And in the voice, that comes across. So if you said, here's 10 guests, Neil, that I've spoken to over the last X months or years, and 5 of them are outstanding and 5 of them are not outstanding, and I'm going to write down on a piece of paper which it is, and we did this as a private experiment, I bet we'd nail it, both of them. And I could do it in the first 30 seconds, not by anything that they bloody said, but by the sound of the voice.
I understand. And
all the listeners know it too.
Yeah, I understand. Now, as I'm listening to you, we're talking about things that seem to be separate. The words that are spoken and their dictionary definition and the feeling that's behind it. But I believe there's a reciprocity, but they feed each other. The words that are spoken emanate from the feeling that comes from within. The esoteric gives rise to the exoteric at every level, not just in the spoken word. That's a powerful medium, but I think in everything that we experience with our physical senses. So, woo! Where the heck do we go from here? I love it. And yes, we could do an entire hour, and maybe we will one day, on that. So powerful. Our voice, and it's used figuratively speaking. Raise your voice. Isn't it interesting? They have no idea what they're talking about.
I know. It's
no idea.
It's very exciting to think about.
It is. Well, where do I want to go? I've got a bunch of stuff. And I don't even really, after that, I'm not quite sure where to go. Here's one. Here's another quote I want to use.
Just talk for 30 seconds while I have a drink of water.
Oh, great. Take your time.
I'll mute it while I glug this down.
Okay, let me know when you're back. Listening. Guys, are you loving this conversation? Listen, while he's having his sip of water, I'm going to go ahead and plug this again. Go to, I believe he said Transmutation Film. Yes, it's transmutationfilm.com. Treat yourself. I'm not being paid for this. You all know that. It is a treat for the soul, and one that is absolutely worthy of seeing time and time again. And now we know for sure there's good reason to go back again and again. So go do that. Okay, I heard that. So I'm assuming you're back.
Yes.
There you go. All right, I'm going to just come right out. Here's another rapid fire quote from the film. The spiritual human must be a proficient detective. Elaborate, please. And I think I know what you mean, but...
I think everybody listening to this knows what that means. Spiritual life is about inquiry. It's about pursuit. It's about reading clues. And it's about translating the invisible into something substantial. Not wishful thinking, not dreams, not fantasy. God is saying, come find me. Like children hiding, he's hiding in a closet. And he's excited to be found. Spirit is the trail to that creator entity, that supernatural person, is spiritual life. And to seize upon that as any kind of serious piece of work, and not just, again, wishful thinking, but actually as a path in life that makes a man stronger, makes a woman stronger, that requires detective abilities. So I've always enjoyed Sherlock Holmes all my life, from the old Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce ones to the Jeremy Brett and Edward Hardwicke ones. I don't like the modern stuff so much, but from 1984 to 1994, Jeremy Brett and Edward Hardwicke made the best Sherlock Holmes depictions you'll ever see in your life. And over again in those stories, you'll walk into a room and there'll be a guy on the floor, dead, with a gun in his hand and a powder burn on his head, and the police walk in and say, "Well, it's a clear case, Mr. Holmes. It's a suicide. I don't think there's anything more to be said, is there?" And Holmes says, "Yeah, okay, well, you guys get out of here, but just give me 5 minutes, will you?" And they go, all right. And they leave him alone, and suddenly he realizes that the appearance of this is very deceptive, and it's been almost set up to test the person, to test their powers of deduction, perception, insight. And every single time, the appearance is the first thing that's the giveaway that there's something wrong. And I think in this world, the obvious wrongness here, the obvious disparity between how wonderful things can be and how awful they often are in society at large, is a giveaway. It's meant to be that way. So the detective looks at it and says, okay, so the wrongness, the brokenness of the world is why in Christian cosmology we call it the fallen world. Today, you just call it the polarized world. And once you've understood the fallen nature of it and what it's for, which is training in distinguishing good and evil, essentially, that's what this world is for, in my view. Once you get that and you realize, again, paradoxically, there's a duality to it and there's also a non-duality to it. Because of dimensionality, we can do both of those at the same time. You start to discern between virtue and, the absence of virtue. You start to discern quality and rubbish. But most significantly of all, you start to discriminate very, very seriously between what is true and what is false. And I would say to you that this powerful statement, if I may say, the truth is available. It's not something that is available relative to everybody. It's always available to everyone. The truth is available to be known. It's in the world. Reality can show you the truth of anything, anybody, any situation. It is there. The truth is available. Many people don't actually think carefully about that. They don't really believe it. They think that the truth is, well, I'm glad you've got your truth. If that works for you, that's great. And I've got my truth. No, it doesn't work like that. 2 + 2 = 4, not 5. You can't both have your own truth in that. One of those things is true and one of them isn't. So the very philosophical, epistemological fact that truth is available is exciting. But to get to it, you have to do a lot of detective work, a lot of pursuit, a lot of healing, a lot of understanding, a lot of coming to humility and humbleness in your own endeavor.
Absolutely.
And realizing that a lot of stuff you had based your personality and confidence on was wrong.
Right.
And you're going to have to tear that up and throw it out.
Absolutely.
And I'd say if somebody said to me, what's the defining characteristic of a spiritually accomplished person? I'd say humbleness.
Let me just tag you with this, and the journeyers have heard me say this. I'm going to say it again. If you dare explore the true nature of reality, humility is a universal mandate.
Oh, lovely.
That's
yes.
mine. That's mine.
That's
and
beautiful.
Because that's what it is. And it's the one thing that seems to be conspicuously missing in this age of opining. I so implore everyone, let's take this moment, both of us, Neil. I implore everyone to please step back and realize that the very things that we discuss on this show and others like it are so paradoxically out of our grasp and within at the same time. Out of our grasp, out of our understanding, and within at the same time. But in this corporeal form that we are now in, humility is the mandate for the universe perhaps to meet you halfway and give you the truth, because it is available.
You have to realize that you're not here for your comfort, security, and entertainment. You're here to serve God. And in that service, you can be the freest, strongest, most liberated woman or man you've ever dreamt of. And that is the shift in priority. It's not about you. It's about a supernatural force who is saying, know me. And in knowing me, I'll give you ultimate freedom and eternal life. That's what this is. It's unpopular these days because it's Christian, but it's not changed. It's still true. It's still true.
I concur there, but I think the only thing I would add or put my sort of view on is in that it's about service to God, service to others, service to self is built in as well. And therefore, in a sense, it is about you in the context of the larger framework. If we are all a part of that same fundamental stuff, I don't know.
I understand what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. If you don't take yourself seriously in the beginning, you can't really do this thing. So you do have to do a ton of work on yourself. But then a threshold is reached where you realize that the work is not in acquisition and knowledge, it's in release, giving, purification.
Agreed.
And that is an act of worship. It's an act of grace. Not on your knees in a church. Let me make a clear distinction here. Christianity and the institution of the church have almost no relationship today. Almost no relationship at all. So don't confuse those two things. That's not what I'm talking about. So my journey into Christian philosophy and theology was from a very esoteric point of view. And you could almost take all the key words out, like sin, salvation, atonement, repentance, Lord Jesus. And if you took those words out, everybody would love it. When you put those words in, because of essentially bad churches over the last 2 millennia, it leaves a nasty taste in a lot of people's mouth who've had a bad experience with Catholicism or Jehovah's Witness or something, Methodism, Seventh-day Adventists, whatever. But actually, when you get right down to it, sola scriptura, the actual pure words, the pure teachings, they are very good, very, very resonant. And they certainly teach that meekness is a path to wisdom.
Absolutely.
But that word today just means gentleness, and gentleness through humility. So that brings us to a point of power. So it's in equilibrium that you find power. Power flows into equilibrium.
I love that word, and I love the idea of that. And I hope that we will make a choice to work on bringing ourselves into balance, just like the earth is and knows how to do, back to nature again. We're going to have to wind this down, man. We went a little over, but I'm not going to let you go without having you tell us what else you've got going on, because I know there's a bunch of stuff. Tell us very quickly.
So, I'll tell you just the two things that I think are most relevant. The first thing is, if you enjoyed anything that you've heard from me today and want to know more, then there's a great opportunity coming just around the corner, which is I'll be doing a weekend at the Omega Institute up in Rhinebeck in upstate New York, September 13, 14, 15. So you can go to neilkramer.com and click on the events section, and you'll see a thing called Fire of Life workshop. So it's a weekend workshop. Tons of people come from all over, very high quality, high caliber, wonderful, beautiful men and women doing serious stuff, really excellent work in their own lives together, and we share those things. And I'll give a series of talks and lectures, and you can see on my webpage what I'm going to be talking about. So Fire of Life workshop, Omega Institute, September 13, 14, 15 this year. Come to that.
Great.
The film, transmutationfilm.com. So you can go there, you can watch it online, stream it for like $5. Or if you want to get into some of the things that we were talking about, give yourself a little birthday present or whatever, spend $30 and it's yours. And you get the film, super high quality, high resolution film, the best quality you can get really in a download. And you get 3 versions of it also with commentaries. So you get a ton for that, a ton. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look at the trailers. And if you like the look and sound of it, then I'm sure that you'd enjoy watching it. And again, the detective work of going into the deeper layers of the film is one of the fun things to do. And it's just very beautiful. It's a champions humanity, champions nature. Everyone can do this if they have the will to do it. So it's a very uplifting film in, difficult days with all the strange things happening in the world at the moment. But I think it's a nice little beacon of goodness.
Well, I second that. I second that motion. Hear, hear, Neil Kramer. Thank you, sir. Always, always a pleasure to have you on. And I do hope, I know you're not doing a ton of interviews these days, but I hope you'll give me the honor of coming back and continuing this beautiful, beautiful discussion. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks everyone, as always, for tuning into Higher Journeys. We'll see you next time. Take care.